His whole life, he had been in charge of the stage, his image, and every room he saw. But Frank Sinatra seemed different near the end. His eyes were softer and his speech was slower. The words he chose had the weight of decades of silence in them. People had talked about his friendship with Sammy Davis Jr. for more than 50 years. The man who was by his side through success, scandal, and a racist country. He finally spoke, but what he said wasn't either a confession or a rejection. It was much more than that, only he and Sammy fully understood the truth. The start, in 1941 in Detroit. It began in 1941 in a room behind the Michigan Theater in Detroit. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, laughing, and the sound of people getting ready. Frank Sinatra, who was 25 years old at the time, was already the show's golden boy and a growing star whose voice could make rooms silent. Even though he wasn't yet chairman of the board, he already had that quiet power that made people look at him when he walked by. He wasn't the only act that night. A small black theater act called the Wilmaston Trio, which included a 16-year-old star named Sammy Davis Jr., shared the stage. The three had been on a never-ending tour of small towns, smoky bars, and bad theaters that barely paid enough to eat. Sammy had been dancing with his father, Sammy Davis Sr., and uncle, Wilmaston, since he was 3 years old. There was no childhood. There was no routine, there were only stage lights, train rides, and cheers that went away as quickly as they came. During the break, Sinatra went into the break room and saw young Sammy eating a lunch by himself. It wasn't a big event or a dramatic meeting. It was just a short human moment between two guys who were very famous and privileged in different ways. Sinatra, who was already admired by white Americans, did the smallest thing that night. He got up and talked. It will never be forgotten by Sammy. He later said Sinatra treated him like a man, not an entertainer or a black kid from Harlem. In 1941, that difference was important. People were still separated based on race and had to follow rules about where they could eat, sleep, and even stand. Each hotel, restaurant, and theater had its own door, which was marked with a different color. A lot of white stars at the time thought that sitting down or talking with a black artist would ruin their careers. Sinatra did it without thinking twice. She was a fan for a long time before they met. He even carried a scrapbook with Sinatra's newspaper clippings in it, which he was proud to show to his grandma. Plus, he liked Sinatra's freedom more than his fame or voice. Sinatra was able to take charge of a stage, say what he thought, and walk through any door without being stopped. In a divided America, that kind of freedom wasn't just exciting for a young black artist, it was unthinkable. The things Sammy learned that day stuck with him when he was called up to the U.S. Army 3 years later. Being in dress didn't make things fair, it made people feel bad about themselves. He was hit, called racial slurs, and once had to paint his face white for a military show for white troops to enjoy. Still, he found a way to get through the pain. He joined a group that put on shows and survived by using humor and music. During those lonely nights, Sammy watched the 1945 short film The House I Live in over and over again. It stars Frank Sinatra. It's a message of togetherness in which Sinatra protects a young Jewish boy from bullies. That everyone in America belonged, no matter what race or religion they were. At the time, the movie's theme was very new, and for Sammy, it was very close to home. So it seemed like Sinatra was talking to him directly and telling him that the dream of equality wasn't just a dream. Sammy made a promise to himself in his head when he got home from the army in 1945, hurt but not broken. To go in the direction Sinatra had pointed him. One of strength, honor, and resistance. He had no idea at the time, but that chance meeting in Detroit would change both of their lives. America loved one singer's voice, and they needed to hear the other one's beat. After the world was split up, they would change the rules for what friendship and trust could mean. Brotherhood in a country that is split. Frank Sinatra was very famous by 1947. He was no longer just the Hoboken singer, he was the voice. Women screamed his name outside of theaters, and record bosses gave in to what he wanted. In the same year, he was asked to be the main act at the famous Capitol Theater in New York, which is one of the most important stages in the United States. Sinatra didn't think twice when asked who he wanted to open for him. The Wilmaston Trio, he said. The theater managers didn't know what to do. White people didn't know about the Wilmaston Trio, a small black vaudeville group with a lot of ability. Sinatra did not mind. In order to get Sammy Davis Jr. on stage, he asked that the three of them be paid 5 times what they normally get paid. The theater didn't want to do it, but Sinatra said it was okay. That night, Sammy went on stage in front of a mostly white crowd. The lights were too bright, and it was very quiet. But within minutes, his smooth dance moves and easy charm made the whole room energized. He finished his show to a roar of cheers. Sinatra smiled at him and told him, "I told them you'd kill it," as he walked off the stage. That moment wasn't just praise for Sammy, it was confirmation. A famous white person not only believed in him, but also put his own image at risk to help him succeed. From that day on, they formed a friendship that would go beyond race, class, and fame. Sinatra saw a lot of himself in Sammy, the hunger, the need to be seen and admired, and the need to be perfect. Yet Sammy's fight was much tougher. America saw his skin color before it saw how smart he was, even when he was at the top of his game. There was a lot of arrogance in Las Vegas. Sammy and other black singers could sing on the biggest stages. But when the show was over, they had to sleep outside the city lines or in rundown motels that only let black people stay. They couldn't eat in the restaurants they performed in or swim in the same hotel pools as white guests. It was a city built on glitz and separation. Frank Sinatra didn't want to accept it. During one trip, Sinatra lost it when the Sands Hotel tried to refuse to give Sammy a room. He said he was going to stop his show and leave. He told them that if he couldn't stay here, neither could I. The hotel gave in. That one act changed the course of Las Vegas's past. Words get around quickly. It wasn't okay to be racist when Sinatra was playing. Of course, there was a complex truth behind that loyalty. Even though Sinatra had a lot of power, they were still in a power struggle. Sinatra was the hero, the guardian, and the man whose word was taken seriously in boardrooms and bars. Even though Sammy was very talented, he was still the one who needed Sinatra. He loved Frank very much, but he could feel the invisible wall between them. It reminded him that in America's racial hierarchy, even friendship had bounds. Still, Sinatra's care went beyond words when tragedy hit. Sammy was driving late one night on Route 66 in 1954 when his car crashed into another car head-on. He made it through, but his left eye was broken. Sinatra was there when he woke up in the hospital. He took care of all the costs and paid all the bills. He even sent his own doctor. He even told Sammy that he could get better at his house in Palm Springs. In later talks, Sammy said something that showed how close they were without saying it. "I went to Frank's house first when I lost my eye because I had nowhere else to go." Sinatra did it because he had to. It was rescue for the Sammy. More than just friends, they were becoming family through pain, loyalty, and an unspoken understanding that people outside of their link would never really understand. In the months after the accident, when things were calm, this is where their bond grew stronger. They had seen the worst of racism, fame, and death. They were from different worlds, but each man saw something unique in the other. Someone who fought with them as well as shared the stage. The Rat Pack age and the holes that were there before. By the end of the 1950s, Sinatra, Davis, Dean Martin, Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop were all part of the Rat Pack. They couldn't be touched. The Kings of Las Vegas changed the way shows are made with their mix of charm, comedy, and chaos. They joked around and drank on stage, making the crowd feel like they were at a private party. But there was something darker going on behind the laughs. Smokey, Charlie, and Spade made a lot of racist jokes about Sammy. All of this happened in public, in full view of everyone, and everyone laughed out loud. They saw it as funny, but Sammy saw it as a way to stay alive. It didn't hurt him, but he smiled and laughed and played along. But the joke stuck around after the curtain came down. Civil rights campaigners called him and said bad things about him. Uncle Tom for putting up with being made fun of by his white friends. They said he was involved and was pretending to be a clown to fit in. Sinatra never said sorry for the jokes, but he always stood up for Sammy. He would tell her, "You don't know me if you think those jokes mean I don't love him." Power was still not distributed evenly. When Sammy spoke out against Sinatra on a radio show in 1959, Sinatra lost it and called him rude and irritable. He called him names, and witnesses later said that some of those names were racist. Davis wasn't in Sinatra's movie Never So Few. Sinatra didn't let him work on any projects for months. Sinatra wouldn't let him back in for Ocean's 11 until Dean Martin stepped in. They were still together, but it was never the same. They learned to keep their fights between themselves. On stage, they couldn't be split up. Off stage, they dealt with a quiet imbalance, love and resentment, loyalty and control, and devotion and the rumors that were never said. Things were different in the early 1960s. At Carnegie Hall, Sinatra and Davis stood together at civil rights events to raise money for Martin Luther King Jr. They put pressure on Las Vegas casinos to end segregation and wanted black artists to be paid the same as white musicians. Their friendship was religious and personal, but it also spread rumors. People watched how Sinatra looked at Davis, how they hugged, and what they said in their whispers on stage. Their duo, Me and My Shadow, wasn't just a song, it felt like a statement. Davis and Sinatra, the white star. The black performers singing next to each other about being together all the time. It was strong, personal, and scary for some people. It started to get talked about. Were they more than just friends? At a time when Hollywood was all about looks and being masculine, any sign of something deeper was seen as scandalous. Tabloids and sources gave hints and made guesses, but neither man ever talked about it. Sinatra waved off questions with the smile that is his trademark. Davis didn't say anything. There was no way for either of them to explain love to someone who hadn't experienced it. The rumors kept going, though. A few people said Sinatra's strong defense of Sammy went beyond friendship. Some people said Davis's loyalty was worship. But the real thing that brought them together wasn't love or fame. In a world that required masks, politics, betrayal, and forgiveness, two men who were both outsiders in their own ways clung to each other to stay alive. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, Sinatra was one of his strongest supporters, which helped get Hollywood behind him. He wanted Sammy to be at the ceremony and stand next to him. Kennedy's team took back the offer, though, when Davis married the white Swedish actress May Britt. They were afraid that a picture of a black guy with a white wife would turn off voters in the South. Sinatra was very angry, but he didn't say anything in public. In his heart, he never forgot about the Kennedys. Sammy was very sad. He later said, "I felt like I helped build a house but wasn't allowed to go inside." Sinatra made him feel better by telling him that politics came and went, but loyalty did not. That dedication lasted through bad times. When Sinatra's son was taken in 1963, Sammy was one of the first people to arrive. Sinatra sent Davis money, set up shows, and asked for favors to keep him working when Davis was broke and addicted to drugs. But by the 1970s, both men were getting older and losing interest. Sinatra had changed his political views and was now a Republican. He had stopped being active in politics. Davis kept singing even though his voice started to sound sick. They didn't see each other as much, but they still had a link. When the Rat Pack got back together with Liza Minnelli for a world tour in 1987, it was a weak ghost of the past. Davis was dealing with cancer. Sinatra's health was getting worse. Still, they stood next to each other and shared one last moment. Davis said, "We began as boys and ended as men. But even when it was over, we were still brothers." Samuel Davis Jr. died at home in Beverly Hills on May 16, 1990, from throat cancer. 64. Sinatra skipped his shows to go to the funeral in Los Angeles. He didn't sing or act, but he walked with shaking hands while carrying Sammy's body. When media later asked him what he had to say, he just read a short statement. "A bond that lasts more than 40 years is hard to describe in a few words. I wish everyone knew Sammy as well as I did." Those words stopped rumors that had been going around for decades. It was neither a rejection nor a confession. It proved something deeper than what rumors could say: love, respect, and friendship. Sinatra died on May 14, 1998, 8 years after Sammy's death, just 2 days before the date of Sammy's death. The news outlet said it was just a chance. But people who knew Sinatra said he had been losing his shine since 1990, when his shadow disappeared. Two men, two heroes, and two lives that will always be linked by love and loyalty that never needed to be explained. Frank Sinatra never told anyone what it meant to be friends with Sammy Davis Jr. He might not have had to, though. Do you think that Sinatra's last words proved what everyone already knew? Share your thoughts below. As always, if you think that friendships can last, please like, share, and subscribe for more Hollywood stories that haven't been told.